Hi, it's Mr. G here, and today we're going through 6.2, how changes in income and price affect consumption choices. So if you remember in 6.1, we talked about how our consumption choices are based upon the idea of maximizing utility, and we calculated out some different examples. In this one, we're going to continue with that same example to show you how changes in income can affect consumer choice, as well as how changes in price can affect consumer choice. So if we look at this example here, we can see that this is a budget constraint. We have a budget of $20. Remember in the last video, it was a budget of $10. So we doubled basically our budget, and this represents a higher level of income. As we earn more, we can spend more, and we can make more choices. So what essentially happened? Well, we can now, instead of affording just 5 bagels and 10 coffees, or 5 bagels or 10 coffees or any combination between, we can now afford to have 10 bagels or 20 coffees or all the different combinations in between. You can see the whole line just shifted to the right. And so this represents the higher level of income, being able to afford more. As you know, as you earn more money, you're able to spend more money and buy more things, etc. So in our example, we just have the 2 products, so we can buy more of those 2 products. And if we look at it, here we have everything else is the same in terms of $2 bagels, our marginal utility, our total utility. All of that stays the same because we're still getting the same amount of satisfaction from 1 item, 2 items, 3 items, 4 items. It doesn't matter how much we earn because our satisfaction is derived by what we're having. We can just afford more. So how does that actually look? Well, if you look at this, basically this opportunity set here, you can see what happens. We can either afford 10 bagels, 0 coffee. And then I take the utility from 10 bagels, well, that's 36. From 0 coffees, obviously that's 0. So our total maximum utility from that combination is 36 utils. The next example, 9 bagels, 2 coffees. That would be a total of 46 for the 9 bagels and 26 for the 2 coffees, for a total of 72, a little bit higher. Then we go into 8 bagels and 4 coffees. Well, 8 bagels gives us a total of 52 utility, and 4 coffees gives us a total of 39 utility. And so if we look at this option, we're left with 91. You can see that the next option happened to give us the same amount. So both of those options essentially would give us the maximizing amount of utility in this case because they're both the same amount. They're both the highest amount. After that, it starts going down. You notice that it's higher than the lower budget. When we had $10 budget, we had the maximum utility was 87. So it makes sense, the more income we have, the more things we can buy, the more things essentially that are satisfying towards it. But not usually a huge amount higher, okay? Because the more we buy, it's diminishing marginal utility. We essentially have less and less utility of the more things we have. But still, if we can buy more, it would make sense that our total utility would be higher. Now, if we go through and we calculate, so what I'm doing now is I'm looking at our example and I'm doing mu divided by p. Okay, so I'm going through, and now with a budget of 20. So really, it's the same as what we've done before. We're going to go through all the different options. So we would choose different ones first. So we would choose probably 11 first, and then we would choose 10. And then we would choose 8, okay, and then we would choose 6, and then 4, and then 4. And we would keep going through until we spent our full budget of $20. And the final combination would be 8 bagels and 4 coffees. And we would just go back and forth. And you might be like, well, we have negative satisfaction for these things. Why would we want to essentially buy things that are, almost making us sick? We get negative satisfaction from it. we're using it. Normally you can have numbers that, would be less, but wouldn't necessarily be a negative. The other thing is we're assuming that we have to spend the whole budget, okay? In real life, when we look at actual what happens in real life, you have multiple different products. Are you going to buy so many bagels that you essentially get sick and that you don't ever want to see one again? No, you would choose to spend it on something else. And that is fine, but we're just more interested in the decision-making process of how it works, not so much on the numbers. So we're assuming we have to spend basically our whole budget. That is why we essentially will go in the negative in this particular case. I could have chosen numbers also that were all positive, and just boosted them higher and never had any negatives. And then even then I would have additional utility per item. Okay, so that is essentially, you would go through that process. And we've done that before, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing again. So you can see essentially the result is we have a higher level of total satisfaction, and we have a different combination that we would choose. So our choices changed based upon the idea of, that we earn more money. We can essentially buy more. And we know this to already be true. And the only reason this wouldn't hold true is, say, for inferior goods. And if you look at satisfaction, well, inferior goods don't give us a lot of satisfaction. So as our income goes up, maybe we wouldn't purchase as many of them. We're not going to go through an example of that. But once again, that's something that if income rises, we wouldn't necessarily purchase more of it. So with inferior goods. We're going to look at the next option, next example here. So the price now increases to $2 per coffee instead of $1. And you can notice that, and I just took the same graph above, except now I increased the price for coffee to $2 from $1, but still a budget of $20. And you can see that basically the budget constraint shifted inward. Okay, because we can no longer afford 20 different coffees. We can only afford maximum 10 different coffees at $2 a piece. And so what did this do? You can see our opportunity set is also going to be different. Okay, and we can see that now the numbers are less for the number of coffees we can afford. And then I had to take the utility, the total utility at each of those amounts. So, still for 10 bagels, it's 36 utilities, 0 coffees, total 36, nothing changed. But now we're 9 bagels and only 1 coffee. So it's 46 plus 15, okay? And if we go through it, we find that the best example is at 5 bagels and 5 coffees. So once again, a completely different choice based on prices changing. We determined that, we don't want as many bagels, or we don't want as many of something else in this particular case because, things have changed. The prices have changed, okay? So in this particular case, but you notice the satisfaction is actually higher. Normally, that wouldn't necessarily be the case. As prices go up, usually the satisfaction would go down. In this particular case, because we're not being forced to consume a negative amount, essentially that comes down to the numbers, that's why essentially it's higher this particular case, because we don't have to go into the negatives. But still then our satisfaction there, we're maximizing it at a choice of 5 bagels and 5 coffees. And if we go through it and do it the other method, essentially we have here 5 bagels, 5 coffees, and we once again just go through, compare. We would do the same idea. We would choose 10 first, then our next one would be 8, and then 7.5, and you keep going through this option, okay, until we basically 4, and then 2.5 would be next, and then 2. Okay, and then we would be left with 0.5, and then that would be our choice. We've used up our full budget now, 5 of each, 10, 20, so that's exactly where we are at. Okay, so once again, price essentially changed how basically our choices that we are going to make. So an increase in price, is going to change our choices. Okay, so we're going to look at some general concepts that came through from these examples, and we're going to look at that. So as we know from earlier, chapter 3, as income rises, demand increases. But what we've noticed is we've actually gone through with the budget constraint, as we earn more money, we can spend more money, and we seek to maximize our utility. So that's the reason demand increases. So that we basically proved why that works. Price increases, demand decreases. Well, we saw that as price goes up, we can afford less of it, and we seek to maximize our options, so therefore demand decreases. And the amounts always vary based on maximizing our utility. So how much things change, we don't know, because we're basically trying to maximize our utility, and we go through this process of like, well, I really want this even though it's more expensive. So we look at the utility factor of things when trying to make our choices. Okay, so that is essentially 6.2. And then in 6.3, we're going to be going through some other effects with the whole idea of utility and how it's used to make choices. All right, it's Mr. G. Bye for now.